Consciousness is a very recent acquisition of nature, and it is still at an experimental state. It is frail, menaced by specific dangers, and easily injured. Carl Jung. In psychology, bicameralism is a hypothesis which argues that the human brain once assumed a state known as bicameral mind, in which cognitive functions are divided between one part of the brain which appears basically to be speaking like the God side, and a second part which listens and obeys, the human side. Here's a little picture now showing you the bicameral brain, the self, the human, the man, and he hears voices of God in the other side of the brain. We've seen this in a picture form and we've never known it. It's called the creation of Adam. It's basically the bicameral mind. You can see it, one part God, one part man, always in our face. So Julian Jaynes was the first one to coin the theory of the bicameral mind. He wrote it in a book about 1976. Now, I've briefly talked about what it is. He's basically metaphorically using the term of government, obviously by meaning two, like you have two states, two houses, as an example of, in ancient times, our ancestors basically used the God side of the brain to talk to the other side of the brain, and that would send like auditory hallucinations, voices of God. And he uses examples of, in Greek terms, they used to talk about logos. Now, obviously, I've talked about that recently, and I just thought it was fascinating to look at it from a different standpoint of view. Is it the case of, yes, in ancient times, society, you did have a bicameral mind, and they heard voices from God? And that is the reason why we have a lot of gods, because people had their own God in the head, and that is basically why we have so many gods. This is what Julian Jaynes is actually saying. So it's not actually my term I'm using. I'm just trying to get it down into a more biteable chunk, because I tried reading it out and it was like 15 minutes long, and even I was falling asleep. But it does contain some really fascinating points. And he's basically talking how we would see it back, we would see it now that back then they could be perceived of being schizophrenic. And obviously when people are schizophrenic, they hear voices. And he states that this is a form of an ancient way of thinking and consciousness being used. But you have to look at it both points of view. Was it a case of we was actually closer to God and it was actually God's voice that we was hearing? Or, like I've also been talking lately, is it the case of voice to skull technology, the voice of God? In the sense of, we had advanced races out there, as we know, and they use that to control the masses. That's just another way of looking at it. So we have us having bicameral mind. If it did, you know what I mean? I'm not for it, I'm not against it. It just raises so many fascinating ideas, and it's just another way to look at it, that in ancient times people were hearing the logos, the word of God, and they were acting on it, and because the culture was in a seamless way, and a lot of people had it didn't stand out. It was like the norm. Do you know what I mean? And that's just how Jaynes is basically, and I'm breaking it really, really, really down to that point. You know what I mean? He talks about how in ancient times people who were dead were still being seated at the family table and were fed, because obviously people were using the bicameral mind, and the hallucinations were telling them to do so. He also states that introspection is an examination of observing one's own mental state, and he says in them days there's like hardly any evidence for this, especially in different books, old ancient books. So he's theorizing that people had a bicameral mind. Now in this video I want to show evidence for this bicameral mind, in the sense of when they came out of a bicameral mind, you can call it the Renaissance or whatever, a type of golden period when we changed our way of thinking. Was it because society was being directed from God? Because I'm not necessarily saying this bicameral mind is bad. We could actually have been talking to source, and they want us away from that. You know what I mean? So there's all so many angles and different points that you can talk about this bicameral mind. I just found it fascinating because they're bringing the idea back in series like Westworld, and that is where I first heard about it. So this is what this video is about. It's just quickly looking at the theory of Julian Jaynes. Did the ancients have a bicameral mind? And this is why we're a lot different, because we can introspect now and we can examine our own thoughts. And the people who do have schizophrenia now are just a part of the ancient society, an ancient society way of thinking. I've talked about this in videos, that they may be listening to voices of the ancients, and he just worded it different. And then obviously included Logos, the word of God, being tied to, and the reason why in society in them days they had so many gods, because people had their own egos that were obviously in, you know, diving in with the voice of God. So they all had their own personal God, and that's why we had a lot of gods. It's just a thought, see what you guys think. Here's a quick quote by him. The bicameral mind with its controlling gods was evolved as a final stage of the evolution of language, and in this development lies the origin of civilization. Julian Jaynes. So let's get to the possible evidence of a bicameral mind. So here we go, guys. I first come aware of the bicameral mind in Westworld. And like Arnold's quote, it talks about consciousness. And it says, consciousness isn't a journey upward, but a journey inward. Not a pyramid, but a maze. Every choice could bring you closer to the centre or send you spiralling to the edges to madness. Now, in Westworld, you have the robots trying to become more human and acting more human, and then you have the humans wanting to become robots, like transhumanism. So it's intriguing that when the robots, or the so-called AI, artificial intelligence in the program, start to become more aware and talk about consciousness, they start to see the maze, the man in the middle. Now, what's intriguing me is, could this be in reflection to our reality too? That when in ancient times we started to change our consciousness from this so-called bicameral mind, did we do the same? Now you'll see it throughout the show if you've watched it. It actually sometimes even appears under the scalps. Some people are actually thinking it's a map to, you know, like a treasure of some sort, but it's about consciousness and finding oneself. Now, could, like I'm saying, this be the key to our reality? Because when we start to look at the brain and different things, we can see how this man in the maze actually fits into our brain, even like the why that I've talked about a lot. And obviously you have in Westworld this relation to the man in the middle and the mazes that we have in this reality. So as you can see, there's pictures and drawings and photos of different mazes appearing in this realm. Could it be the fact that when we was changing over from a bicameral mind, when an empire got destroyed, etc., our consciousness shifted from the old ways to the new ways, and a part of that process was drawing and designing these labyrinths that we see on coins and in churches and in ancient areas of this realm. It's just an idea that tying a TV drama, TV series that actually want to show us something. You know, when we always say they're hiding things in plain sight, I mean, you have a Native American symbol, the same here. I think this was a mischief god. Could it in fact be that they were showing us in Westworld that when the consciousness, you know, changes from a bicameral mind to the so-called consciousness of a human being, that we start to reflect on life, that the is it called the introspection, and it creates these images of the maze. That's why we're seeing built and designed all around this realm, because people's realities were changing, so they created the maze. It's just an idea. Let's see what you guys think. So this bicameral mind, they hear the voice of God from the right side. That's what it's basically been talking about. Now we have these labyrinths appearing in churches, and they actually refer it to like the walk to Jerusalem, a path of Jerusalem. So Jerusalem is involved from churches' perspective. Now remember when Jerusalem was at the heart of all maps, it appeared at the centre. So again, it's tied to the bicameral mind, God, the voice of God, Jerusalem and Westworld. They showed symbol behind his head there, you can quite see it, and Dolores touch it as well. It's very reminiscent to the Jerusalem cross for me. I can see that, and a lot of you will see that yep, it resembles the Jerusalem cross. Well, what connects all these together? The labyrinth, Westworld, and possibly this reality in regards to the voice of God. Just look how you can draw a labyrinth. Yeah. Isn't that not blowing you away that the simple way to draw a labyrinth is to start with 4 dots and a cross? That to me is wow. So simple, yet blows you away that the cross of Jerusalem actually helps you to draw a labyrinth, which is a part of coming out of, let's say, of the bicameral mind. Is this what connects everything together? Religion, Jerusalem, and the bicameral mind of the consciousness being changed from that. What do you guys think?
Yeah, they call me the black sheep. You know they call me the black sheep. I'm running wild while you're asleep. That's why they call me the black sheep.
Hello and welcome. Right guys, it's a short video today. I'm not going to premiere it because the time I say hello to everyone and everyone's getting ready, sitting down for a long video, it's off. It's like, no! So it's a short one for a purpose. It's a really, really deep subject, and like many of you know, I like to stick my foot into a topic and get ready for, to actually research it deeper along the line, or trying to connect it to other videos. So this is like a first foray of into the bicameral mind. I've done a video on Westworld before. If you want to catch that, please go to Odyssey, type in the Black Sheep Researcher, and you'll see it in the videos. Westworld, I go into it, Westworld really, really deep. First two series, not the third one. I've not watched that yet. That's why I wanted to watch that first, and then I can make another one maybe. So this was about the bicameral mind. Do you believe Julian Jaynes' assessment that the ancients had this? Yay or nay? Because it does answer a lot of questions I have had, but it also gives me more questions. It's like, well, what about Tartaria? What about other advanced races? Were they coming out of this so-called bicameral mind, or are these people who control the populace so that we stay in this bicameral mind sense, or they have nothing to do with it? It's just a natural progression of consciousness, our soul wanting to learn more. Could be. I'm open for anything. Like I said, I just treat this information. I'm not against it. I'm not for it. I've just found a few of the points that he made interesting, especially when he's talking about how the ancient Greeks talk about this bicameral mind and in essence of the word logos. And obviously I've just done a video, not really on logos, but mention that. So if that word of God actually ties into a bicameral mind in the sense of they were listening to, and it could be God, it could be the case of people listen to the God and were closer to God now, and now the Kabbalists have actually found a way using frequencies that I've talked about to cut off the antenna to God, so we're not hearing him as much. It could quite be that. I am not, like I said, I'm not nay or yay on this theory. I just found some of the points fascinating, and I wanted to just share what I've learned so far and asking the question. Because when I saw the bicameral mind and how he was talking, I'm thinking, why? Well, in the series Westworld, when they're starting to, the robots were starting to act more human and getting a consciousness shift out of reality of just being a robot, they started to see the maze, and I thought, wow, could that in fact be the same type of thing happening in this reality? We part of the play, whether you believe in non-playing characters or how I talked about it lately, do we as consciousness have to draw certain images like a mind control technique? When, for instance, all the films that Mortal Instance of Bones, Conspiracy Theory with Mel Gibson, he has to go out and buy a book. Is this a case of reality of this? Because I found so many similarities between that symbol, the labyrinth, the maze symbol, and our brain and obviously the labyrinths. People are talking how they look like computer components, which they do. I've talked about that in other videos. But what if that was just inbuilt into us when we are coming out of a bicameral mind? Our consciousness is shifting. We're becoming so more self-aware, and that was an introspection. That is a symbol that we have to react with. We have to design. We have to build. And he's talking about how a lot of the ancients were listening to that, and it was all metaphorically, and they were hearing voices, and they were actually acting out their lives in regard to what that side of the brain was telling them. And that is why there was more gods. We call it more. Anything we do, we say, oh, you got such and such modern soft mick. You know what I mean? It's just a saying that we have over here. I don't know what it is. But it's basically saying how we have more gods for everything. And that's how, in regard to when I'm looking into Janos, he is like a god of everything. That could be classed as one of these things happening. If we are listening to one part of the brain and we see things, I always sometimes call it pareidolia. Julian says that in them days, the modern day version would be a schizophrenic. I've always talked about how could that be schizophrenic, be listening to thoughts and words of the ancestors, because people talk about the memories stored in the akashic or the catchy records. I believe it is in like the liquid, the waters above, but we have an antenna, the Y, and we talk about uploading and downloading. And if you're able to have a sensitivity, every memory ever recorded would be up there, so you would actually tie in, because you've got the same antenna, basically, in the sense of your ancestors. You could actually pick up old thoughts from olden times, and I've always talked about that. So these people, according to this theory, were listening to the right side. It was given the left side hallucinations and voices to follow. Is that why we've got a lot of gods? Is this guy talking bollards, as I say? I just find it fascinating that obviously he took words, the logos. I've been talking about the word of God, and if you look at it from no point of view that you're not looking into religion or anything, or you look in the Bible. If someone said you hear the word of God, they call it logos, and he's talking about how they listen on the right side. It's just intriguing, isn't it? And how it's tied to gods and religion. And in ancient times, we know they have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of gods. And could something be influencing people to follow these different religions? And it's that bicameral mind. Some people disagree with the theory. I'm not neon, yay. I just like some of the points that he makes and I've made in the video. And some I don't, because obviously there's advanced races out there, advanced tech, antiquitech. Who is that? Is that the case of the controllers? Or is that the sense of every time we come out of one of these bicameral minds where our consciousness shifts and comes into what we call like the golden age now of, being connected to the one source? That is a sign that, the labyrinth's made. And is that a sign for them, whoever's be the evil behind this reality, love to do the resets? Who knows? Is it, you know what I mean? It's just intriguing me that, obviously, we had the Tower of Babel. Everyone spoke one religion, and they didn't like that. So God knocked the tower down. Obviously, some people believe it's not our God. Who knows? Because like I said, it just makes you think then about everything, like aspects of the Bible. Were these people, because how many times have I made a video and said I'm going to show you an ancient image? We don't even know if these guys were stoned on a hallucinogen, some form of drugs or drink. And when they're out of their heads, they're actually thinking metaphorically and looking at these symbols and drawing, because they're tripping. And I've always laughed, but this could actually tie into the bicameral mind. If people were using that side of the brain, the God voice, we don't know if that's our consciousness, our muse. We just don't know. I have no way of collaborating what Julian Jaynes said. I just found some of the aspects of what he says fascinating, and some of the things not fascinating, but I just treat it as an information. It's so uncanny that it's a labyrinth, and we see a lot of labyrinths around this realm, and they go folklore, mythology, TV, films. And it's in the TV series. We always talk about hidden in plain sight. They show the labyrinth as a consciousness shift. And they also show the symbol of what is remarkably like the Jerusalem cross. Jerusalem was, for a long time, the centre of this reality. So that ties in with the Godhead, the God voice, because you would want one place, for main religion. And it has the Jerusalem cross, which is the same symbol, which then makes a labyrinth. That was just a big whoa for me, and surely not a coincidence. So I don't want to go too much into it because it's a deep topic. I'm just finding my feet into it, and occasionally I want to make short videos just on one specific little comment or theory, and this is one of those videos. Is labyrinths that we're all seeing around this realm in churches, in ancient people building them in stones, a sign of a consciousness shift, a reaction from changing from a so-called bicameral mind to the consciousness that we show today? Who knows? I'll leave that up for you guys and see what you guys think. It could be something I've totally not even talked about, which is highly possible. But I just find it fascinating that the ancients, like I've been saying, could have been under some sort of influence, and it could be this Godhead. Doesn't necessarily mean it wasn't God itself. And this reality now is that they've cut us off from that reality, so we have to self-introspect, examine ourselves, because a piece of God is still in us. Who knows, it can be anything like that or nothing. But I just found it fascinating. So hopefully you guys, you've enjoyed just a little short video. I'm sorry it's not in a premiere, but time I said hello to everyone, it'll be going off. And everyone's like, no. So I've not done it. So hopefully you've enjoyed it. Stay safe. Always wear a smile. Pay it forward. Please like, share, and get this, we're gaining momentum now. And that's only for you beautiful people helping me. Because obviously I don't promote myself too much, you know what I mean? Because I like to people's, have the privacy. Right guys, stay safe, and I'll see you soon. Bye guys.